headaches or malignant tumors or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Justice will be replaced by pity as the cardinal human virtue, and all fear and retribution will vanish. Every corner boy will congratulate himself, "Aha, I'm such a sinner, God had to come down in person to save me. I must be the devil of a fellow." Every crook will argue, "I like committing crimes, God likes forgiving them. Really, the world is admirably arranged." And the ambition of every young cop will be to secure a deathbed repentance. The new aristocracy will consist exclusively of hermits, bums, and permanent invalids. The rough diamond, the consumptive whore, the bandit who is good to his mother, the epileptic girl who has a way with animals will be the heroes and heroines of this new tragedy when the general, the statesman, and the philosopher have become the butt of every farce and satire. Naturally, this cannot be allowed to happen. Civilization must be saved, even if this means sending for the military, as I suppose it does. How dreary. Why is it that in the end, civilization always has to call in these professional tidiers to whom it's all one, whether it's Pythagoras or a lunatic they're instructed to exterminate? Oh dear, why couldn't this wretched infant have been born someplace else? Why can't people be sensible? I don't want to be horrid. Why can't they see that the notion of a finite God is absurd? Because it is. And suppose, just for the sake of argument, that it isn't, that this story is true, that this child is in some inexplicable manner both God and man, that he grows up, lives, and dies without committing a single sin. Would that make life any better? Oh, on the contrary, it would make it far, far worse. For if it could only mean this, that having once shown them how, God would expect everyone, regardless of their fortune, to lead a sinless life in the flesh and on earth. Then indeed would the human race be plunged into madness and despair. And for me personally, at that moment, it would mean that God had given me the power to destroy himself. Well, I refuse to be taken in. He could not play such a horrible practical joke. Why should he dislike me so? I've worked like a slave. Ask anyone you will like. I've read all official dispatches without skipping. I've taken elocution lessons. I've hardly ever taken bribes. How dare he allow me to decide? I've tried to be good. I brush my teeth every night. I haven't been intimate with my wife for a month. I object. I'm a liberal. I want everyone to be happy. I wish I had never been born. Distressing reminiscences that touch upon our own lives. How often have we, in our practical, rational, sensible selves, found ourselves justifying, excusing, or overlooking actions that we knew were questionable? Oh, it's the only sensible thing. Certainly there was no alternative. Oh, it's the best of all possible, or the least of two evils. This is a hard place to be. Not where we want Christmas to go at all, and yet it has to be here, because Christmas is the beginning of a story whose end, we already know, is troubling, demanding, difficult, frightening. And that shadow falls across this story too. And not to see that is to take part in a willful ignorance of the arc that lies before us. And yet, we must not hasten to the end of the story. There is still somewhere a child who has not been threatened, flying perhaps into Egypt, resting at home in your houses, likely a grandchild for some of you. And there's nothing wrong with treasuring that. To seize this moment, this occasion, to feel the ironies, the incongruities, and yet believe. Remember what the man said about Joseph. Let me turn back to that so I can get it just right. To choose what is difficult all one's days as if it were easy. That is faith. And then the angel says, Joseph, praise. It's time that we let music recall us to our praiseworthy selves.
O Holy Night is, I think, one of the most beautiful songs, but so often one of the most overwrought songs. One of the gifts of working around here, in the midst of getting to learn so many of your stories, is getting to work with Professor Fred. And I thought, as you listen to this song, especially being put between the massacre of the innocents and flight into Egypt, would to be and know a little bit of this song. And part of what's echoing in my head with what Fred just read, and I hope you caught that line, is when Herod said, where justice will be replaced by pity is the chief virtue. This song, this hymn, was written by a bunch of folks who actually would have belonged on the island of misfit toys. Hopefully you know what I'm referring to. If you haven't, you need to watch more Christmas movies. The man who wrote the original words for Cantique de Noël wasn't even really that much of a churchgoer. And Placide wrote it for a priest. It was set to the music by Adolphe Adams, who his father didn't even want him, in fact, forbade him from studying music. And then it became a popular song. And then, when they realized that the person who composed the words was a socialist, and they realized in France that the man who composed the music was a Jew, the song was forbidden. One of the bishops called it and denounced it for the lack of musical taste and absence of the spirit of religion. So the words that you're going to hear now were actually written using very much the French words, but were written by a Unitarian minister who had panic attacks when he stood in front of people. So he instead went to music where he could work privately. He found this song. He brought it to the American public when he heard the last verse. And I just thought you'd like to know that even in the midst of the places where you wonder how you can be used, or sometimes where we justify like Herod just did, that everything that we have, even when it's imperfect, can be used in beautiful ways. So, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born, oh, night, oh, holy night, oh, night divine, led by the light of faith serenely beaming, with glowing hearts by his cradle is holy.